everyone, and welcome. Today, we're diving into something pretty amazing, the fundamental rights that protect our liberty and our dignity. We're going to uncover how one single idea in the Constitution acted like a big bang, creating this entire galaxy of protections that, honestly, you probably use every single day without even realizing it. So, let's get started.
So, let me ask you this. What if I told you that so many of the rights you hold dear, your privacy, your right to a clean environment, even the right to an education, all spring from one single powerful source? That's the big question we're tackling today. We're on a mission to find that one right that really does give birth to all the others.
Okay, so our journey kicks off with what the Supreme Court itself has called the sanctified right, Article 21, the right to life. But, and this is crucial, this isn't just about breathing or surviving. No, this is the seed from which an entire universe of protections has grown.
Now, when you first read this, it seems almost simple. Procedure established by law. Sounds pretty straightforward, right? But the real magic, the whole story, lies in how the meaning of these few words has been completely and totally transformed over time.
This right here, this is the constitutional Big Bang I was talking about. See, back in 1950, the courts had a really narrow view. As long as a procedure was technically a law, it was fine, even if it was totally unfair. But then came 1978 and the landmark Maneka Gandhi case, and everything changed. The court basically flipped the script. It said a procedure can't just exist, it has to be just, fair, and reasonable. That one little shift brought the whole idea of fairness and due process into Indian law. And it fundamentally changed the game for liberty in this country.
And this timeline just lays it all out so perfectly. You can see the journey, right? From that really restrictive view back in 1950 to the Great Expansion in 78, all the way to 2017. And that year was huge, because in the landmark Puttaswamy case, the court officially declared that our right to privacy is a fundamental part of our right to life. It just goes to show you, Article 21 is truly a living, breathing thing.
And here's the result of all that growth. The courts have said time and again that life isn't just about the act of breathing, it's about living with human dignity. And from that one powerful idea, all these other rights have branched out. A clean environment, shelter, legal aid, the right to information, they all trace their roots right back to that expansive idea of Article 21. It's pretty incredible when you think about it.
Okay, so we've seen the source, the Big Bang of our rights. Now let's look at the shields the Constitution gives us. These are the rights that directly protect you from state overreach and make sure its power stays in check. So Article 22 gets into arrest and detention, and it splits it into two different types. First, you have punitive detention. That's for a crime that's already been committed, and it comes with really important safeguards, like your right to a lawyer. But then there's preventative detention, which is, a bit more controversial. This is about stopping a crime before it happens. But even here, the Constitution puts in checks and balances, like a 3-month time limit before an advisory board has to review it. The key takeaway is this: the state's power is never, ever absolute.
And the Constitution also throws a powerful shield around the most vulnerable among us. Articles 23 and 24 get right to the heart of human dignity by flat-out banning things like human trafficking and forced labor. It ensures nobody can be treated like property.
And this number, 14, is absolutely critical. Article 24 draws a bright, clear line in the sand. It prohibits employing any child below the age of 14 in factories, mines, or any other kind of hazardous work. It is a non-negotiable protection for childhood.
All right, let's shift gears a little. We've talked about liberty, now let's talk about identity. This next group of rights is all about protecting our personal beliefs and our communities inside a really diverse, secular country.
Article 25 breaks religious freedom down into three basic parts. You have the right to profess, which means you can openly say what your faith is. You have the right to practice your rituals and ceremonies. And you have the right to propagate, which means sharing information about your religion. Now, of course, all of these rights have to be balanced against things like public order, morality, and health.
Okay, now this is a point that sometimes trips people up, so let's make it super clear. Article 29 is for everyone. Any section of citizens has the right to protect their own distinct language, script, or culture. Article 30, on the other hand, is specifically for religious or linguistic minorities. It guarantees their right to set up their own schools and colleges. So one is broad and for everybody, the other is very specific.
And speaking of education, this next right has such a fascinating backstory. It didn't actually start out as a fundamental right at all. It was more of a policy goal.
And its journey to becoming a core, guaranteed right, well, it's a perfect example of our living Constitution at work.
So how did this happen? Well, in a case called Uni Krishnan, the Supreme Court basically connected the dots in this incredibly powerful way. They argued that you can't really live a life with dignity, which is the heart of Article 21, remember, if you don't have an education. They essentially said the right to education was already hiding inside the right to life all along.
And following the court's lead, Parliament went ahead and made it official. In 2002, they added Article 21A to the Constitution. And look at the wording here. This isn't a suggestion, it's a mandate. The state shall provide free and compulsory education for kids between 6 and 14. That one change transformed the entire educational landscape for millions of children.
All right, for our final section, we're going to look at one of the most unique and, one of the most controversial features in the entire Constitution, a special kind of protective shield, a locked box, that's designed to protect certain laws from being challenged in court.
This is Schedule 9. The easiest way to think about it is like a constitutional safe or a vault. When Parliament puts a law inside this schedule, it gets this shield that protects it from being struck down for violating fundamental rights. It was originally created for things like land reforms, but over the years, its use got a lot broader.
And that, of course, leads to the giant, critical question, what happens if this shield is misused? What if a law that totally destroys your liberty gets put inside this locked box? Does that make it untouchable?
And the Supreme Court's answer to that was a massive, resounding no. In the Ira Kohilo case, the court basically announced that it holds the key to this box. It set a deadline. Any law placed in Schedule 9 after April 24, 1973, which is the famous date of the Kesavandabarty judgment, can be unlocked and reviewed. And if that law violates the basic structure of the Constitution, it can be thrown out. It's this brilliant check that proves nothing, not even a locked box, is above the Constitution itself.
So if there's one thing to take away from all this, it's that our rights aren't just words frozen in time. The Constitution is a living document. It's like a living tree whose branches are constantly growing, constantly expanding to shield us and protect our dignity in a world that's always changing.
Which brings us to one last thought. From privacy to a clean environment, the right to life has grown in ways its framers could never have predicted. And that expansion, it's not over. So I'll leave you with this question to think about. What do you think it will include next? What will a life with dignity mean for the future? Thanks so much for joining this Explain.